The sun was just beginning to set as I set out on the Pacific Crest Trail near Mount McLoughlin. The air was crisp, and the forest was alive with the sounds of nature. I had been planning this hike for months, eager to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. Little did I know, this hike would be anything but peaceful as I ventured deeper into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around me. The trail, once well marked, became increasingly difficult to follow. I shrugged of the unease creeping up my spine, attributing it to my overactive imagination. After all, I was alone in the wilderness, and my mind was bound to play tricks on me. The first sign that something was amiss came when I stumbled upon an old, weathered signpost. The words were barely legible, but I could make out the name McLoughlin and an arrow pointing deeper into the woods. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow the arrow, hoping it would lead me to a scenic overlook or a hidden waterfall. As I walked, the forest grew darker and more oppressive. The sounds of birds and insects faded away, replaced by an eerie silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent my heart racing. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I reached a clearing just as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. In the center of the clearing stood an old, dilapidated cabin. The windows were broken, and the door hung off its hinges. It looked like it hadn't been inhabited in years, despite my better judgment. I felt drawn to the cabin, as if some unseen force was pulling me towards it. As I approached the cabin, I noticed strange symbols carved into the wooden walls. They were unlike anything I had ever seen before, and they filled me with a sense of dread. I hesitated at the threshold, but a sudden gust of wind pushed me forward, and I found myself inside. The interior of the cabin was even more unsettling than the outside. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the floor was littered with debris. In the corner of the room, I saw a small, dusty journal. I picked it up and began to read, hoping to find some explanation for the strange symbols and the eerie atmosphere. The journal belonged to a man named Thomas, who had lived in the cabin many years ago. His entries started off normal enough, detailing his daily life and his love for the wilderness. But as I read on, the entries became increasingly erratic and disturbing. Thomas wrote about hearing voices in the woods, seeing shadowy figures at night, and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. The final entry sent chills down my spine. Thomas wrote about a creature that lived in the forest, a creature that fed on fear and despair. He described it as a tall, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. According to Thomas, the creature had been stalking him for weeks, driving him to the brink of madness. The last line of the journal read, "It's here. I can feel it watching me. I don't think I'll survive the night." I dropped the journal and backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to get out of there, but as I turned to leave, I heard a low, guttural growl. I froze, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the growl grew louder, and I could see a pair of glowing red eyes staring at me from the shadows. Panic set in, and I bolted out of the cabin, running as fast as I could through the forest. The trees seemed to close in around me, and the path was barely visible in the darkness. I could hear the creature behind me, its growls growing louder and more menacing. I didn't dare look back, fearing that if I did, I would be lost forever. I ran until my legs gave out, Collapsing in a heap on the forest floor, the growls had stopped, but the sense of dread remained. I lay there, gasping for breath, too terrified to move. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. When I awoke, the sun was rising, and the forest was once again filled with the sounds of nature. I cautiously made my way back to the trail, my mind racing with thoughts of the creature and the journal. I knew I had to get out of the forest and warn others about the danger that lurked near Mount McLoughlin. As I reached the trailhead, I saw a group of hikers preparing to set out. I tried to warn them, but they just laughed and dismissed my story as a figment of my imagination. I watched them disappear into the forest, a sense of helplessness washing over me. To this day, I can't explain what happened to me on that hike. Was it all just a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear? Or is there truly something sinister lurking in the woods near Mount McLoughlin? All I know is that I will never set foot on the Pacific Crest Trail again.